Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, and I'm joined as always by my co hosts, Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello,
Hello.
guys.
Hello, hello.
How are we all doing today?
Doing good. Feeling fresh. Feeling like a new logo.
Yes, indeed. Keen-eyed viewers may have spotted a new logo. Um, I was going to wait. We're coming up to our 100th episode. I think this is going to be episode 95 or 96, if I remember correctly. So we're getting close to episode 100, and I thought maybe I'll save it for episode 100, but then it just kept sitting on my desktop staring at me. So I said, screw it, I'll just put it up now. So listeners, hope you're liking the rebrand. It's been long enough that we got a proper logo and not just some rights-free art that I stole from a website and put
The
some words over. So
the reel on our old logo is getting a little bit of vinegar syndrome. We needed to modernize it.
yes, and indeed, needed to upscale to digital. So all very good, all very good. Before we get into today's films, which obviously Zach picked out for us, anyone want to give a shout out to anything that they've seen or watched or ordered?
You want to go first, Zach? Or
I can go first. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to check it out, but Martin Scorsese's new film, Killers of the Flower Moon trailer recently released. I also think it was shown at Cannes last night, and of course it got good reviews. That's not too shocking. I read the book years ago, so I'm very excited for the movie in general. It's a really good book. I would actually recommend people watch the movie because there's a lot of. I already feel like I'm spoiled of everything that's going to happen, but it's very, very good book, and I think the movie's going to be great. But I decided it was probably time that I actually complete Scorsese, because I am nowhere close as far as I can tell. So the other day I got through about 4 of his movies, all kind of random which ones I watched, just whichever ones I owned or I could stream. Went back through The Departed, which is still great. It's still better than Infernal Affairs by a large margin. So good job, Scorsese, for making a remake better than the original, which I will stand by. And then the second, what did I watch after that? I know I watched a bunch of Leo. I think I watched like 3 Leo ones. I won't remember the order. I also watched Shutter Island, which is fine. Like, Shutter Island's okay. Like, I think it's actually better on rewatch. And I'm not going to spoil it just for the weird few people who haven't seen it yet. How ridiculous the whole plot is once you know everything actually kind of makes it more fun because it's played like really earnestly. And it's like, this is so over the top if you really like sit down and think about it for more than like 5 minutes. But you know, that kind of gives it an enjoyment factor too. It's a decent little mystery. The performances are fine. And my God, I am really blanking on what the second one I watched was. So while I'm talking, I'm gonna have to look it up because I'm blanked hard.
It's the like Shutter.
Oh,
I haven't seen
Gangs of
Shutter
New
Island in a
York.
long time. Oh, okay, I haven't seen that one actually.
I like Gangs is also one of those movies that's good. I actually feel like that's going to be closer to what like Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be like tone wise, but it is by far like carried by Daniel Day-Lewis. Like he
Hmm.
really makes Leo feel like an amateur, and Leo is good in the movie, but like the character Daniel Day-Lewis plays is so good. Like that makes every scene you almost feel weird because you're just waiting for his scenes to come back for like some of the movie. You're like, okay, I want to see what more he's doing because he's by far the most interesting character of the movie. But still enjoyable. It's beautifully shot. You know, I remember reading like this thing where the time it came out, everyone was talking about, well, you could have done these sets digitally, and it's so great that it's not, because one, I don't think that would have aged well with 2001 special effects, and two, it's just it adds so much. There's so much texture in the movie. Like everything looks so down and gritty and dirty, and it's like really good. It's probably like the best he's ever shot New York in a lot of ways. Like it has like a lot of that Taxi Driver feel of that down and dirtiness to it, but in its own unique way. It's very unique in the sense of the atmosphere and the bleakness to it. And the final one I watched that day, because this just had to be a heavy day, was I ended up on Silence, which has always been one of my favorites by him. Just fantastic movie. Also beautifully shot. I don't think it gets a lot of recognition, and I'm not really sure why, if it's just the subject matter or that it wasn't advertised well. I'm not really sure because I don't remember it getting a lot of fanfare in 2016. I know people who have seen it like it, but it seemed like it wasn't. It kind of got stuck in between, I guess, Wolf of Wall Street and The Irishman, and I don't know. Nobody really. I hear talk about it a whole lot. Great before, and I kind of find myself as I'm going through this rewatch. You know, he likes to use Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro a lot. Honestly, my top three, neither one of them are in it because so far it's Bringing Out the Dead, The Last Temptation of Christ, and Silence. And I'm like, oh, none of his usuals are in there. And I don't know if that's going to say anything going forward, but I thought it was interesting.
Were they dressed as Spider-Man and Kylo Ren?
It'd have been cool if they were. I mean, there's some robes in there, so it kind of works.
I feel like there's two types of Scorsese fans. There's people who like Scorsese movies, and then there's people who like Scorsese gangster movies. And
it's weird because, like, I know when I'm done with my ranking, people are really going to hate on the fact that I have Goodfellas kind of low.
Nah,
and I like that
movie. A
movie.
mistake already.
Yeah, I like Goodfellas. I don't love it. Like, I think it's got a really, it's a cool movie, but it doesn't do a lot for me. Like, it's got a good energy to it. I enjoy, like, I think I just don't like Henry Hill. I know he's a real person, but as a character, I just don't care. And I don't. Like, every time I watch, I'm like, man, I don't like Henry Hill.
That's fair. I love Goodfellas.
Yeah, I love Goodfellas as well. But I'll be interested to see your final ranking. This is the thing about rankings, though, right? Like, let's say I'm just making this up for you, Zach. Let's say you put Goodfellas at 4 stars, and then you just have like 9 movies that are 5 stars. It doesn't mean that you don't like it. It's just like, like this is the thing with the Kurosawa ranking. People are always like, "Well, everything is terrible." I'm like, well, yeah, but like the first 13 are 5 stars. Like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah,
you almost feel like you have to put a disclaimer in the list to say, by the way, I like all these movies apart from like the bottom 3 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and but usually what it really gets into with Scorsese is like, I'll put The Irishman above Goodfellas, and they're like, I can't believe you like. I was like, I like it better. I just think it's a better movie, and people get weird about it. Like, I feel there's always like these canonized ones. Like, everyone needs to have these 3 as their top 3. It doesn't matter the order, just as long as it's these 3. And then if you don't, you get. I think I showed somebody my Tarantino ranking one time, and because I put Jackie Brown up high and I put Pulp Fiction on the lower end, it was just like immediate, like, contrarian opinion. I'm like, no. Like, I don't care. I put I have like the Halloween and The Thing as my 2 favorite like horror movies of all time. I'm not here to be contrarian. Like, there's just certain things that don't go for me as well.
Yeah. This is random, but what's the movie called? Killers of a Flower Moon?
Yes.
So that was shot in my parents' hometown.
Oh, really? Where? What is that?
It's called Bartlesville. It's in Oklahoma.
Okay, so they did shoot in Oklahoma. That's really cool because I know. I know the Osage people have given it their blessing.
That's
they're
cool.
very interesting people anyway, because I won't go too far into it, but they were very pro-American. Like, they fought in the Revolutionary War. They fought in the Civil War. They bought their reservation land. Like, so to see like how the U.S. government ends up treating them makes people very angry, especially when you read the book. So I'm very curious how it'll be handled. But so far, the Osage people were very supportive of the film.
Oh, that's cool. There's just something to watch out for. There's a priest in that movie that I think has some scenes with De Niro, or maybe I don't know. It's not a huge role, but it's more than one line. And
Okay.
that was my mom's priest for the last 20 years until he retired.
I'm very excited to look for that now. I'll have to remember that because I don't think we get it until like October.
Okay.
Fans got it last night, so it'll be a little bit.
Got you. Yeah. The last one that was shot there was shoot. There was a Terry Malick movie that was shot there that nobody likes. And then
Night of Cups. No, not Night of Cups. It's the LA one.
And then there's one called August
Songs?
Osage County that was shot there. That's not a Malick movie. Hold on. Anyways,
I remember August Osage County. I remember that film. It was like a family drama. It was Meryl Streep in it.
Yeah. And then what is that? It had was it August? It was the Malick movie had Ben Affleck in it and Rachel McAdams.
Yeah, To the Wonder.
To the Wonder. That was
Yeah.
shot there too. And that was the time when I didn't know that they were shooting. And we were up there just visiting my parents, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to be extras?" And they ended up cutting the scene. But because we were extras, we got invited to Rachel McAdams' birthday party. Have I told y'all this story?
No, I don't think so.
I feel like you vaguely mentioned it at some point about mentioning meeting Ben Affleck, but I
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
context.
Yeah. Yeah, he was not in the mood to meet strangers. And plus I was, for some reason, even though I'm like in sales for a living and talk for a living, I got super awkward around him. Like I didn't know if I should have made a like a Mallrats joke or like a Chasing Amy joke or just,
Go
or if I
reindeer games. Go reindeer games.
reindeer games. I just, yeah, I couldn't tell. Like he was kind of in a sour mood. He was just sitting there drinking with like a scowl on his face. And
I think that's just Ben Affleck in general. I
Yeah, I heard
wouldn't
he
feel
kind of has
bad
a
about it.
resting bitch face.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that just seems to be him. So I wouldn't be too concerned. And I also wouldn't be too concerned about your scene getting cut because there's like A-list movie stars that get their scenes cut by Terrence Malick. So
I was about to
he
say, isn't
shoots,
that like the whole thing with Thin Red Line?
yeah, like he shoots like 5 hours of content and like loses entire storylines and characters. So I wouldn't feel too bad. I think Javier Bardem had like an entire scene, an entire role cut
Wow,
out of one of his films. So
wow, that's crazy.
you have
No,
that in common with Javier Bardem. So
me
there you
and
go.
Javi.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just quickly go, or unless Adam, you want, I know you said you didn't have a ton. Do you want to go
Uh,
now?
yeah, like the only thing I've seen recently, I saw the new Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rise. And if you haven't checked out Zach's little recap review on our YouTube channel, please do that because it's really good. And I pretty much have the same kind of thoughts as Zach with it. You know, it's fun, it's Evil Dead, it's bloody, it's gory. There's a bit of comedy thrown in. Some of the dialogue is just insane. Some of the shit that the characters say to each other. Um, it went in a direction that I didn't expect it to go. But then also, I would agree in Zach's thoughts that it didn't really utilize an urban setting as much as it should have. You know, they're in an apartment building, but they only stay on one floor for like 90% of the movie. So um, I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was a fun time. You know, you kind of get what you pay for with an Evil Dead movie. You're going to get some gore. You're going to get some awkward laughs. You're going to get some demons. So I think it delivered on all of those, but probably could have been more. But yeah, I enjoyed it for the most part. I had fun.
And it's tough because like all the Evil Dead movies are good. Like I like them all. It's a very consistent franchise,
Mm.
but it's because it feels weird for me to say, yeah, I think it's the weakest one, and I still really liked it. But yeah, I mean, it's a compliment in its own way, I suppose. They've kept the quality high.
Is
Yeah.
this still Alejandro de Aya or whatever the?
No, it's an Irish director, Lee Cronin. He's the guy
Did
that
Hole
wrote
in the
and directed
Ground,
it.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he did the film Hole in the Ground. That's where he got his name. And he did this. He wrote and directed this one. I saw that basically what Raimi's plan is basically just to have new people kind of just jump in and out of the franchise and just sort of tell different stories rather than trying to do like a cohesive storyline.
Oh, cool.
That's what I read. They're just going to get different people to come in and sort of interpret the lore in their own way and tell different stories and stuff,
Love that.
which I think is pretty cool. It's kind of the best way to
Uh,
do something like Evil Dead, isn't it? Because there's only so much, like, you know, everyone loves, Bruce, but like, there's only so many times, you know, you can watch the same dude with a chainsaw fight demons. So,
yeah.
for something that doesn't have, a singular villain, there is no main demon or anything like that. You know, it's just a group of undead demons. It's one of those franchises where you can just take it in different directions and different places every film, and it doesn't actually matter. You're just getting it move around. You can try different things in different settings, which this film tried to do. It brought it to an urban setting. It took it out of the cabin in the woods. It didn't do enough with its urban setting, but it was still different in that sense. So, if they go that direction with the franchise, I think that's a pretty good way to go with it, because they have that freedom of not having, a singular big bad. It's just the demons, basically. Wherever the book goes, the demons can go too.
Though I would totally be okay if they want to do a Payday one to come back and do a sequel to the 2013 film. I'd be cool with that.
The, the Hellraiser franchise is one that does that, right? As long as somebody ends up with that puzzle box, then they get to experience the pain and the pleasure.
Yeah, I think this is the good thing when you don't have a singular sort of overarching villain, that you have that freedom that, like, say, I know Evil Dead and slasher movies are not the same thing, but and same with Hellraiser, they're not really slasher movies, but like that's the kind of the problem with slasher movies, if you want to say so. There's only so many different ways you can have Jason or Michael Myers cut somebody up without it getting ridiculous. You know, we see that with like, you know, like Jason X going to space, or Jason Takes Manhattan, or Jason Takes a boat to Manhattan, whatever way you want to play it. I think that's Scream kind of gets away with it a little bit because like Ghostface, anybody can be Ghostface, anybody anywhere can be Ghostface. So Scream kind of gets away with it. Like it's funny when you think about it, like only only three of the 6 Scream movies take place in Woodsboro, even though it's an iconic sort of slasher location. Only half of the films actually take place there. You know, the rest of them take place in other locations because it doesn't actually matter. You don't have to explain how Michael Myers got to New York or how Jason got to New York because someone in New York can be the killer. So, you know, when you have franchises like that where they don't have an overarching big bad, you have the freedom to sort of play around with the settings and stuff, which I always like.
I'm just excited we got the Friday the 13th quota in for this episode from Adam. I'd be really upset if we missed out on that.
Oh yeah, we have to hit our quota. It's probably been a while since we mentioned Friday the 13th. They need to maybe make a new one or something just so that we can get our quota in. But we're good for this episode at least.
Let's see. I'll be fast because there's just a few that I want to highlight. So first of all, I saw the original, actually not the original, there's one in the 30s. I saw the 60s film called Maniac, which is a Hammer film. So I can say I've seen a Hammer film now. And in fact, I've seen 2 now. I saw Maniac, and then just recently I saw The Gorgon, which is the Medusa one.
That's Peter Cushing.
Oh
one,
yeah,
right?
yeah, P.D. Cushing and Chris Lee.
Oh, both of them. Cool. Awesome.
Oh yeah.
I've only seen a few Hammer films myself. The one that they did together, the Curse of Frankenstein, is great. I'd really recommend that one. It's a really darkly funny film for a Frankenstein movie. It has a lot of just like the Hammer films in general. Well, I can't speak of the 2 that you watch, but the Hammer films that I've seen, they have this sort of that dry British drawl humor thrown in with their horror. The Curse of Frankenstein is good for that. I don't know if you experienced that yourself.
I would say the Gorgon is more like that, for sure. Like I felt like what I expected to see when coming into a Hammer film, I saw in the Gorgon. It's just over the top, and Chris Lee has on like some bad makeup, bad prosthetic makeup, looking a lot like Nick Cage, which was kind of awesome, and really hamming it up. But Maniac was awesome. It's Zach, have you seen it by chance? I think you'd love it.
No, I haven't. I'm actually like, I've seen some Hammer, but I've definitely never done a deep dive.
Well, yeah, count me 2 in to my deep dive here. But Maniac is all about a guy who he essentially is like a flame torch, like like you see in like metallurgy, like those torches that just shoot like a beam of flame out.
Okay.
Like a blowtorch.
A blowtorch, kind of. Yeah,
okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's his weapon of choice. And
okay, I'm into that.
And yeah, and he traps people in like it follows this guy who's and the plot is just insane. It's like this guy falls in love with the daughter, but marries the mom. And so there's like that subplot going on, and then the dad is in an insane asylum, but he escaped and is watching them, and there's a blowtorch involved in the last act. It's pretty great. Saw the original The Fly, and I'm just gonna I just want to talk about that movie to anybody. Like that movie is so underrated. It's awesome. It's so good.
And it is, because it annoys me how much people say how corny it is. And I'm like, I don't think you've seen it. Like, it's definitely like not as gross as like the Cronenberg one and Dark, but I wouldn't I personally, I never saw it as corny, but I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I just had a fun time with it. It's like, he shows up with basically like a furry costume on, like this giant fly head.
Mhm.
Uh, and and she just has to do that. There is a scene in particular where she's trying to swat a fly in the room but you can't see the fly, and so she just overacts like crazy, and it's good. But no, the it's anyways. I had a blast with it. So um, fun movie. And then the only other one I'll kind of talk about here um is it's the Spine 108 for anybody that cares. Actually, Arrow doesn't do Spine. Catalog number 108 for their American release is George Romero Between Night and Dawn. It's
Okay,
a
yeah, yeah.
it's a
I've seen
green
all those
box.
things. Yeah,
Yeah, and the second one is Season of the Witch. And
yeah, that's an interesting one.
like I just felt the whole time like I was watching a pornography film without any of the porn. It's
Yeah.
all you get is like the low budget and the bad acting and the ridiculous plot. And I was like, come on. And like the whole premise, like the big I'm gonna spoil it here, so sorry for anybody who hasn't seen Season of the Witch. But like the buildup is that this kind of housewife is in what's the movie where the Stepford Wives where they're all like robots or whatever. This is more like there's a coven of middle class bourgeois women that are becoming witches, and there's like a scene in the end where she has this big reveal where she's at a dinner party and she's like, "But I'm a witch," and it's like the whole big like reveal for. And I was like, like 90 minutes of this like horrible. I don't know. Anyways, I was not a fan. I was trying to. I'm excited to get into the last one is the Crazies in that set, which I've heard is pretty good. So I'm excited to get into that.
The
It
Crazies
is
is
good, and
crazy.
yeah,
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just like Vietnam the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just like pure like they're just yeah, it's just like pure Vietnam metaphor. It's like if you condense Vietnam metaphors into a film, that's the Crazies.
Okay. Well, he was very preachy early in his career.
did
Um,
speaking of Hammer though, have you seen the Woman in Black by any chance, the one with Daniel Radcliffe?
Oh, with Daniel Radcliffe, yeah, like when it came out, so however long that was, like 10 years ago or more.
That's
Was that
technically a Hammer
is
film.
that technically a Hammer film? Cool.
Yeah, Hammer Productions made that.
My experience with Hammer, and I won't make this too much of a sidestep. So a lot of my journey in film from like as a young age was all thanks to my grandfather. I used to stay with him a lot during the summertime, stay with my grandparents for a couple of weeks, and he'd show me movies. Like he showed me Jaws for the first time, he showed me Psycho for the first time, all when I was like sort of 10, 11, 12. That's what kind of got me into horror at that age. And Hammer used to do a series, a TV series called Hammer's House of Horror. It was just like an anthology series. It'd have like a different story every week, and it'd always be like really macabre. And it's built into my brain. An episode that I watched him called "The House That Bled," and it's just like really weird story about this family moving into a house, and like literally like the walls start bleeding, and like there's like a haunting and all that stuff. But there's a really great twist at the end. They used to have like sort of Twilight Zone style twists, but like they were very much in the vein of like Hammer horror in terms of the style and stuff. So I don't know if they're like available to watch anywhere or if they're on Blu-ray or whatever. I remember years and years ago when I was still like a young teenager, my dad had like a DVD box set of it. But if you ever get a chance to watch any of them, Hammer's House of Horror, it's just a cool little series. Like every episode is just its own kind of self-contained story, and they're very, very Hammer in terms of the sort of aesthetics.
It is free on Tubi apparently, so I don't know
There
about
you
the
go.
rest, but that's at least there.
Well, at least watch the episode, The House. I think it's called The House That Bled, or the house that's something blood or something like that. It's something along those lines. I'm gonna look it up now actually because it's going to annoy me.
Might be you to it. Let me see.
The House That Bled to Death. That was it.
Yep, just found it.
nice.
Yeah, The House That Bled to Death. Recommend that. Or what year was it? 1980. Yeah, so it was episode 5 of Hammer House of Horror. So if you ever get a chance to see it, I'd recommend that episode. I don't remember any other episode of it. That one is just kind of sort of, that's like a deep memory for me, is watching that. and being quite frightened of it as like an 11, 12-year-old before I'd sort of gotten properly into horror.
It sounds
I
like
might
kind
check.
of darkly tragic. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I might check it out here soon. I always kind of like. I got into like the Westerner, which was like a Sam Peckinpah show, like from the '60s. So I kind of like these shows that just didn't make it, but they were made by like either like big productions or certain directors and stuff. I find it kind of neat, and it doesn't take a time investment.
Well, I suppose we'll move into what we're actually here to talk about today, unless anyone else has anything to bring up.
No, the
No?
only thing I'll just say is the Severin bundles are shipping now. So I got my bundle with the ET ripoff called Extraterrestrial Visitors.
No.
I love Italian ripoff so much. I haven't seen it yet, but I was excited to get that bundle in. But
Awesome.
no, not a lot in terms of pickups. Let's go. Let's go talk about some standoffs and political activism.
Yeah, Zach, why don't you give an introduction as to what we're going to be talking about today?
All right, so for anyone who may have missed last week, my picks were mainly to pick two films because I kind of have an issue with the term thriller in most cases because I think it's either misused and I just most of the time choose not to use it. But I decided to pick two films that I thought actually fit the term thriller pretty well and what I at least think of when I think of this really vague genre description. So the first one I wanted to pick was the standoff at the standoff at Sparrow Creek, which was the first film by filmmaker Henry Dunham that came out in 2018. Jesus, long description on Letterboxd. So let me go through this. After a mass shooting at a police funeral, reclusive ex-cop Gannon finds himself unwittingly forced out of retirement when he realizes that the killer belongs to the same militia he joined after quitting the force. Understanding that the shooting could set off a chain reaction of copycat violence across the country, Gannon quarantines his fellow militiamen to a remote lumber mill that they call their headquarters. There he sets about a series of grueling interrogations intent on ferreting out the killer and turning him over to the authorities to prevent further bloodshed. So, Chris, since I'll start with you, since I think you didn't fall asleep in the middle of this one, so we can go ahead and hear your thoughts about it.
It won me over. I think I'm gonna say I like this movie a fair amount. I'm not a huge fan of the like subgenre of action kind of thrillers called what I call like aggressive whispering movies, where it's just men being more macho than the other guy and just being like, well, looks like we got a problem. Like, like I don't know. As soon as I see that, my brain kind of shuts off a little bit. So in the beginning, I was like, oh, for fuck. Okay. But credit to Durham or Dunham? Henry
Make
Durham?
sure. Dunham. So
Henry
Dunham.
Dunham. Okay. Henry Dunham. Credit to Dunham. He's a pretty good writer. Like there's actually like this, if you told me this parts of this were written by Mamet or overseen by Mamet, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have thought it. Especially, I think his character Keating was his most interesting to me. Without the kid or the younger kid, I really like the way he was written, and that actor's a hell of an actor. And then I really want to talk about the last set piece because that was probably one of the more visually interesting things I've seen in a decade. Like I just like it was amazing. So yeah, it won me over. I'm glad I saw this one. This is cool, and we can get into some of the political activism stuff here in a minute and get canceled by social media. But Adam, what about you?
Yeah, at some point I'm going to need some context about militiamen as the resident non-Yank. I don't really know what that is. I didn't know if these were like good guys, bad guys. If they're going to be shooting up cops, I assume they're the bad guys, but you never know with American cops. So yeah, I'm going to need some kind of context around militia men and militia stuff. But in terms of the film itself, yeah, I liked it. It was taut, it was thrilling, so I think it fits the thriller. But as you said, it wasn't like a freaking Fast and Furious movie or whatever. It was a film where there's an exact thriller subgenre description I'm trying to think of, like a hard boil slow burn, one of those terms maybe fit a little bit better. Because it's a very quiet film. I don't think there's any music. I don't recall hearing any like theme music at all. It's a very quiet sort of low burner kind of a film, which I really enjoyed. The cast are all great. It's all full of like character actors that like I see their faces and I'm like, oh shit, I need to pause this and find out where I've seen this guy. And then another 5 minutes later, I'm like, right, I better pause it and find out where I've seen this guy. As I recognize like most of the actors. Chris Mulkey was the one I recognized the most because he's in Twin Peaks. So that was an obvious one for me. But the rest of them, like I've definitely seen this guy somewhere, so I had to like keep pausing it to like go onto their letterbox to see where I've seen them. The writing, you mentioned the script, so I'll just kind of talk about the script. There was parts of it, and I thought it was funny that you mentioned like playwrights, because there was parts of the script that I thought were very, very scripty. You know, that, you know, I was listening to going, these dudes aren't really saying this, you know, in real life, are they? There was very scripty moments in it, in terms of some of the dialogue. But overall, I liked the film. I'm a bit on the fence with the ending. You know,
I am too. Well, I figured we'll talk about that, but I
yeah,
am for both movies we'll talk about.
Yeah, I'm a bit on the fence with the ending. Not in terms of like, you know, like you said, with the set piece and how it played out, thought it was really cool. Just with how it fits with me actually sitting and enjoying and watching this movie. But overall, you know, I liked it. I enjoyed it, had a good time. It was an interesting mystery. And yeah, it was a good movie.
Can I just really quick before you go, Zach? There's a Vinegar Syndrome Discord that I'm become more like active in recently, since I'm on Discord anyways for our group. And I posted, they have like a now watching channel. So I posted in there and I was chatting with somebody about it who loved this movie. And I was like, in the last 5 minutes, I said, okay, final set piece moves it up 2 stars for me. Oh, ending knocks it back down 0.5 star.
Yeah.
So I think I'm right there with you. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
No, and actually, Chris, if you want to, while we're picking up, I doubt it's on any of the list.
It's not. Sure. No, I checked. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was like, if you haven't, I would say, because it's pretty new. And a little history about the film. So this was one of, if not, well, I won't say the last, but it was definitely the last one before all the controversy came out around Cinestate. We did talk about Cinestate once before when with Bone Tomahawk. They were a indie studio that got a bit of controversy. So this was one of the final ones. And I think that actually did hurt it getting any, because a lot of their other films at least did get a lot of marketing. This one didn't get quite as much. And I think it was because it was kind of like dead in the middle of all that. But I will go ahead and answer the best I can, because I do think they purposely keep this vague, because I mean, this isn't something, in all intents and purposes, these people are doing criminal activities. They have automatic weapons, which for most people, unless you do the paperwork, is illegal to own in the United States. What they're mainly doing, at least from my interpretation, is these are men who are more than likely very pro 2A, very pro Second Amendment, because a big part of that, the bear arms part, is probably the most famous part of that amendment. But the other part is it is required to have essentially it says to have a free state, you need a well-armed militia. And so there are probably more than likely groups of people who get together who are very much see themselves as militia types. They collect weapons, they probably do odd jobs for certain things, and they're usually ex-military, ex-police of some sort. So that is kind of, from what I gather, because they do keep it kind of vague, what they're doing here is the well-armed militia type people.
But what's the purpose of them? What's their goal?
So
isn't it like government oversight?
Yeah, it's a belief that you need militias to check and balance the government. Like, if you, it's this, let me try to do this on the most amount of eggshells I can.
Hey, you picked the movie, man.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do this right. So, essentially, the idea is that gun control is an overstep by the state, and that these people will hoard weapons because of the idea that if the government were to completely overstep, a group of well-armed militia would be necessary to keep a free state.
Okay, so essentially their idea is that if there ever came a time where they felt that the government wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, they will be in a position where they can take control back from the government for whatever, whether it be their county, their state, whatever.
Right, and that's a big part of like the film where they're desperate to figure out who committed this shooting at a police funeral, because they don't want to look, that gives every militia in that area a terrible name. Like if
Yeah.
they're official, if they're not, it gives people a very negative look at militia types, that they are nothing but gun nuts who want to cause violence, when that's not how they want to be perceived. They want to be perceived as a legitimate part of what the founding fathers intended when they wrote that amendment. That is
And I
kind of
think,
the idea.
like, I think context is really important too, because in 2023, I think it's hard to understand the origin of militias, right? But if you think about coming from a monarchy where there was no ability to overthrow this family, and then setting up a system of government, I can imagine why that was important for them when they were writing the Constitution, right? Like,
Yeah, I think it is, and I mean, I won't get into how people kind of perceive it today, because I don't think that's necessarily too important for this, but it is an idea that people who are very passionate about this amendment believe it is a necessity, and still to this day a necessity, because the idea is for many that for many people, the first step to government overstepping is to disarm your people, and that's why many people become so passionate with it, because of that fear.
it's almost become kind of like a cosplay thing now, right? It's just a dangerous one because everybody has like these really advanced weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to a sense, I think there is definitely people who see guns in a very not beneficial way, like they like
Yeah.
the power that comes from guns versus what the importance of it as a tool,
Mm-mm.
and the respect that something dangerous like that deserves necessarily. Because regardless, I think, of how anyone feels about the ownership of guns, it is a very dangerous item that should be respected and taken care of, and you know treated as it should be treated, and not, yeah, as you're saying, like people do with cosplay or with power or anything like that, which I don't think the characters in this movie necessarily try to portray. Well, there may be one that is, and that's what they're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So would I be right in saying, so because this kind of helps me contextualize the film a little bit better, so because that I was kind of thrown as in like why they were so like I had assumed the reason why they were so intent on sort of portraying them as not being the perpetrators was because they just didn't want the police coming down on them. But would I be right now, just after sort of hearing that context, that it's more so a case where they see themselves as potential saviors, and by them instigating this kind of fight by going to a police funeral and shooting it up, it's making them look like terrorists as opposed to potential saviors?
Yeah,
Would
that's
I
a
be
great
right?
way to put it. Yeah. There's,
Okay.
it's this thin line, when you look at the perspective of freedom fighters, the only difference between freedom fighters and terrorists is what side you're on.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I get that context from an Irish point of view. So I certainly get that context with the IRA and stuff like that. It's a very thin line.
mhm. And and there's always, and when we talk about legality, now they don't go over if they can legally have these weapons, because there is a lot of complications with automatic weapons in the US, which I will one is, I believe it's a 1986 act that says any automatic weapon made before, basically when Reagan was shot, you can legally own to a point. They are not restricted. Good luck finding one. They're very expensive, and there's so few of them left because most of them came from like Vietnam or World War II or Korea. So they're tough to get. And the other is, you can technically do paperwork to give up another amendment right to own automatic weapons. It is a complicated procedure, and it is difficult to get. But essentially you give up your Fourth Amendment right. They may have done this. I don't know, because they don't really go into the legality of their automatic weapons. So I don't know if what they have is legal or not, but I don't know if it's necessarily important either, because it's just mostly going into, how they view themselves, and, somebody going against what they believe is important in this case. Like they don't, you talk to a lot of people who are going to be in this case, they're not going to care about the legality because they believe the government has already overstepped by limiting automatic weapons, by putting limits on on magazine capacity and things such as that.
It's interesting. And again, from coming from a completely different sort of political context, like, is this, like, would you consider this a political film? You mentioned that studio. I assume this is probably the same studio that put out a lot of Zahler's work.
It is the studio that put out two of S. Craig Zahler's films. And they also did Run, Hide, Fight, which was the school shooting film that ended up getting put out by Daily Wire after they shut down.
Okay. Because obviously we talked about that during the Bone Tomahawk episode, right? About sort of Zahler's iffy, well, I'm not going to say iffy, but like somewhat controversial politics. This didn't feel political to me. Yeah, like this film, like I was interested when you said it was from the same studio, because to me, from an outsider's point of view, yes, like there's obviously some kind of political element to it, but it didn't feel very pro sort of conservative. It wasn't painting these guys as heroes. It was painting these guys as kind of pathetic.
And I think it takes a pretty fair stance of what's going on, because and I mean, it's hard to talk about without the ending, but I'll say it vaguely. It's almost the sense that if people believe this, is it too late? So you can look at it that way, or can you look at it as these are just terrorists, or are they people who really perceive themselves as freedom fighters? I think they take a very fair look at the type of people who become this. And I mean, obviously, the main character Gannon has good intentions. He obviously wants to find out who did this horrible act for his own reasons, for his own, mission of what he believes is right. But at the end of the day, what he wants to do is morally correct, even if the reasons aren't what most people would. I mean, I doubt he cares that much about the police. Even as a police guy, I don't think he cares. Like, what happened?
This is something the film did that I think was good for the most part, because it did do a decent job of explaining certain characters' motivations as to why they would be involved in this. Obviously, Gannon has that backstory, as to why he left the police. So, why he would be adverse to, why he would join a militia. Now that I know the context of why militias exist, it makes sense why he would join a militia, because, he's seen firsthand how corrupt the police can be. So, if they decide to do things on a bigger scale, a militia is something that you're going to need to be a part of to try and combat that. And then there's other characters, that character who they originally sort of were interrogating, whose daughter was sort of murdered, and reckons that the police kind of covered it up and everything like that. So I think the film does a good job at sort of painting reasons why some of these characters would be involved without romanticizing it. Because I think majority, for me anyway, like most of these characters were just losers, to be honest with you. At least that's how I perceive them. They're just people who are angry at the world and want somewhere to shout it, so they decide to go for the most extreme version of that. The only character that makes sense to why he would be part of something like this is Gannon, because of the backstory that we're given, which was a crazy scene. Some really, really intense direction work there, framing and lighting and shadow. Really, really great scene. That whole kind of backstory for Gannon as to why he left the police. I feel like I got a bit more context now, so I appreciate you guys putting that in a better light, because obviously I understood the plot just from a plot point of view, but I didn't really fully understand motivations for certain things. So I feel like I understand it a little bit better now.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, I think maybe, and you can tell me when we get to the next one, I feel like that's a little bit more of a universal thing. That's still very American because of, it's American issues, but I feel like at least the second one we'll go over might be a little bit more universal as far as like motivations.
It's just an ecological kind of like activism movie, right? I think I agree with you. I think that's universal.
Yeah.
This one, the only thing, there's this idea that I had running through my head as I was watching this, and I'm curious what y'all think on this. Like, you have Reservoir Dogs, which I would put in a similar genre.
Yeah.
You have this, and I was trying to think of like what it like, this tightly confined space where there's a high tension. That there's a whole world of stuff happening like outside of the room that they're in that's driving the drama inside the room, right? It's a cool way to make a low budget movie. Are there any others that y'all can think about in this kind of subgenre of?
I mean, it's not exact, but I always think of these movies as like the Thing movies. It's paranoia.
Oh
It's
yeah, that's good.
it's that lack of control. And I do think Reservoir Dogs fits it better because there is that the police are looking for them and they're having so much tension trying to figure out. Of course, in that movie, it's who set them up, and in this one,
Yeah.
it's who put them in a bad position to look the way they do. So yeah, there is a type, and I mean, I'm trying to think of
The
what might
only
be.
the only two that come to my head would be Lifeboat from Hitchcock, where they're all stuck on a lifeboat,
Mhm.
and also that Cloverfield Lane one. I can't remember what
That's a
number.
good one. Ken
Something.
Cloverfield Lane. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of that. There's a few of these films, and there's one that I just can't pull the details from, about, as you said, just kind of stuck in a room and you don't really know exactly what's happening on the outside, and that tension and paranoia is bleeding into what's going on inside.
Yeah.
It's a cool genre, a cool subgenre. That way to tell a story, especially a low budget film.
Yeah.
Super creative, best way to do it, really. Obviously Reservoir Dogs is called like the heist movie without a heist. It's a cool way to tell a story.
And there is a name for that, like, and I'm trying to think of what I've heard them at, because it's not just like there's a name for it. It's besides just like one location, like phone booth and stuff like that. But I just
I
can't
guess you
think.
could even throw Panic Room in there a little bit, right?
Yeah, I would say so. It's been a long time since I've seen Panic Room, but that I feel like that one gives a lot more perspective of the home invaders.
Oh, that's
It
true.
might
Kind of
kind of
does,
do it,
yeah.
but I think it still kind of fits that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the dialogue as well, Adam, because I always struggle. I go back and forth. Like, sometimes it's entertaining to watch dialogue like that, but it kind of comes off a little bit of like the writer just saying like, "Look how smart I am," or something, and I don't know, like you said, it kind of loses a touch on reality because people, especially in a situation like that, probably wouldn't talk in that way, at least not exactly. Um, I think a movie like Dog Day Afternoon does a good job of being like, the characters are more human, I think, in that, which is, you start to almost like empathize with them more because you see they're not reacting perfectly and they don't have like a perfectly scripted thing to say. They're just kind of fumbling and like trying to figure out how to adapt as everything goes wrong. I did struggle a bit with the dialogue, and I'd be curious to hear more about that from both of y'all.
Far from a Cassavetes film in terms of
Yeah.
dialogue.
I do think that is a experience, because I remember, Adam, when you talked about in your episode with Tarantino, you talked a bit about Pulp Fiction and its dialogue and the idea that it's very cool, but it also doesn't come off as realistic, even though it has been called that several times.
Perfectly, yeah, it's like perfectly calculated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as these people who focus a lot on it, we talked about with Bone Tomahawk that it kind of came off that Zoller is a novelist because of the way his characters talk, and it makes sense. He's a novelist, and it's you have these the directors and writers who really focus on dialogue, and I think always it's kind of weird when they first start, and that's not to excuse it. I do agree that there is definitely dialogue in this that you're like, it's good dialogue, but there needs to be a balance. And I think that's something you find more. And I hope he gets other chances, because he's obviously a very talented guy. I'd hate for Cinestate to be the reason he never gets work again, because he's very talented. And I think he would do better with more time with stuff like that.
Yeah, like from a direction point of view, I thought the direction was fantastic. Some of the shot competition that he did. And I think you mentioned it in your review, Zach, on your Letterboxd review, about how, he shot something as boring as like an old lumber mill, just sort of boring factory warehouse kind of thing. But it always looks interesting. So I think his direction is really, really good. It's just some of his dialogue obviously is could do with a little work. Now, saying that, if this was a stage play, which, for these kind of films where it's all basically in one location, you could easily adapt it into a stage play. I think the dialogue might work a little bit better. But from a movie point of view, yeah, it's just, and it's not like it broke the film for me or anything like that. I didn't knock off a couple of stars because I didn't like some of the dialogue. It was just like one of those like noticeable things while I was watching it that just kind of took me out of it a little bit, like took me out of the scenario thinking, that doesn't sound like something he would say if this was a real human being. But his direction pulls you back in because I think he's a talented director. And it'd be, so he hasn't made any more films after this. Is that right? Then is this his only film?
Not that at least last time I checked, he has not.
It shows. No, I was just looking that up while you are. It shows he has 4 upcoming, but he hasn't directed anything yet.
Okay. Well, I would hope that if he's not a scumbag, I would hope that he gets work, because I think he's a talented director. That scene with Gannon's backstory blew me away. The direction, that's phenomenal. So
yeah.
It really reminded me. There's that shot where the lights, I won't go into spoilers, but like there's a shot where the lights are pointing towards the tree and Gannon walking towards the tree, and it reminded me of Zodiac. I don't know if got that vibe from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's a really good director. Obviously it's just you could tell he was probably trying hard with his dialogue, but that's something that kind of comes with time anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
And I could see over trying it too, when you're like, I have got to make interesting dialogue because 90% of this movie is dialogue driven. Like, I've got to do it. Like, so I don't know if you go a little too hard when you do that or what, but I can see that, because I would probably think the same way. Like, I can't have boring dialogue when 90% of the movie is dialogue.
And I mean, to be fair to the guy, this is his debut film, right? So
yeah.
It just comes with, if that's the worst thing you can say about this, it's a pretty fantastic debut.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, Adam, because you're the noir guy. I don't know if this would, like, this, the way it's shot falls under noir, but there's something about, I see in certain like more modern types of this where they do a lot of shadow work with yellow lights. There's another one I've seen like that. I don't know if it quite falls under that, but it's what it always reminds me of. Like when I see this, and Dragged Across Concrete was like this as well, where they use a lot of yellows and blacks. And I don't know if that's actually a thing in noir or not.
I suppose that's like with noir is always in, all the sort of classic era noirs are always in black and white. So that's the best way to modernize it, I suppose, isn't it? So using yellow lights to sort of accentuate those shadows, because that's probably one of the most, in terms of, how noir films look, sort of playing with shadow is like, that's like one of the sort of cornerstones of film noirs. So I could certainly see that being an influence. Could we call this a neo noir? Yeah, maybe. I don't see why not. Really, it's pretty hard boiled. There's a mystery. It doesn't have all the elements of classic noir, but not every classic noir film has all the elements of classic noir. So I would, if someone called this film a neo noir, I wouldn't say it wasn't.
Post neo noir.
Post neo noir.
Yeah, coincidental. Well, I was thinking of that scene, and we touched on it a little bit with the one where they're interrogating the what's his name, starts with a K.
Keating.
Yeah, when they're interrogating him, like those harsh yellow lights just like showing from a distance like that. I just think that's a beautiful shot. That's the one that always sticks out to me when I think about the movie. And there's a lot of that within the film of him just kind of playing around with lights and stuff, which I thought was really cool.
That's the thing. You kind of. Oh, sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
No. Go for it, man.
I was gonna say you kind of have to do that when you're shooting in a location like this. So this is just completely on the opposite end of the scale here in terms of filmmaking. Apocalypse Now. When Brando showed up super overweight to Apocalypse Now, they had to film him cloaked in shadow because they didn't want to show off the fact that he was hugely overweight. And this film is kind of like that in a way. You have to film with a lot of shadow because you can't really show the fact that they're shooting in a very boring location. Right. So shooting your characters drenched in sort of light and shadow makes a very uninteresting location suddenly look very interesting and moody and mysterious.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a little bit the opposite of what y'all are saying, but talking about shots, uh, John Goodman in a red wig, that guy,
Yeah, I know the dude you're talking about.
Morris, the
Oh, okay.
first the first guy that gets interrogated. I actually looked it up to see if it was John Goodman in makeup. Um, um, there's a shot in there where he takes him down to this interrogation room and he says, hey, I had to pull you down here. I think it's Keating. And then they pull back. And I don't know a lot about cinematography, but one thing I understand or I've heard before is that if you're going to have a room that's tall, like the room that they were in was quite tall and also quite wide, and you want to show everything in focus, like that can take quite a bit of planning and setup to make that look good. And so I felt like that was a kind of a shot that I really was impressed with, because they pulled back and then you could see this just the size of the room. And it, that when they were talking to each other, it kind of made them feel like more isolated, I think, in this giant room. I love that shot as well.
And I want to say the cinematographer, whose name, let me see if I can look it up real quick. His name was Jackson Hunt. This seems to be his only feature film. He's got a bunch of shorts, and I think he's got like a documentary, but this is his only feature. And I was very impressed because I was like, I would watch more with him if he
Oh
continued
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, he'll get more work. I mean, some of these shots could be in any director that gets talked about a lot. Like they could be in those films, right? And people would be like, yeah, that makes sense as like a Roger Deakins shot or something.
I think this film has a lot of creative people that should and probably will get more work. I think it just seems like they were obviously just part of in the wrong place at the wrong time in terms of like the production company that they were working with. But yeah, there's a lot of sort of people behind this film, the director and the cinematographer, who clearly very talented people and deserve more time to kind of hone their work, because they could become great.
Mm-hmm.
Shown plenty of potential here. Do we want to talk about the ending before we sort of?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so
Okay,
we'll give
spoiler warning.
spoiler warning for sure. So the twist ending for this is that there was no shooting. Everything was orchestrated, by the police in order to basically give an excuse to go and essentially hunt down and shut down this whole operation. And that would then give them an excuse to kind of go after other militias. It was all part of a sort of wider operation, it seems. And when the twist first happened, I was like, shit, that's a cool ass twist. And then I just kind of started thinking about it, and I don't mind twists in movies for the most part. Twists can be fun, but it annoys me when a twist kind of comes out of nowhere. It feels a little bit like unearned. Because what I like about twists in movies is being able to go back and spot the clues. And I feel like this film is very light on the clues. You have Gannon's backstory that kind of shows that the police are not the most honest people in the world, far from it. And you have the fact that there's an undercover cop part of the group. But that's all you really, unless I miss something, that's all you really have to go on.
It's a little circumstantial, but I guess where they never heard this happened on the news, like because they hear it through a police scanner. And it's like, okay, because they would be listening to the police scanner and not the news. Because I mean, you obviously can't air this on the news that a bunch of police officers were shot in a funeral, because that's going to need a lot of explanation. Like when it turns out no one was shot at a police funeral. So, I mean, I guess there's little stuff like that where you can kind of like break down the logic. But then the problem with that is you start breaking down, like, why didn't they look into, I know they took their phones, which helps. That helps kind of the scenario. But I was like, none of them turned on the radio and on the way there or heard anything. I was like, maybe they could justify it's, they're trying to keep it under wraps until they investigate more. But I don't know. A bunch of people shot an AR-15 on modern day news. I think it'll show up pretty quick.
Yeah, like that was my problem. Yeah. Like I've kind of figured out my rating system on Letterboxd is a bit erratic, but I've kind of figured out a pattern of mine where if I like a film, but I probably won't watch it again, I give it 4 stars. If I like a film and I would watch it again, I give it 4.5. That's pretty much where I've landed. And this one ended up on 4 because of the twist, and it's because I feel like I have nothing to gain from rewatching this movie. When you have a twist, I feel like most of the time anyway with twists, you kind of want to watch it again to see, did you see it coming? Like even though I don't particularly like this movie, I'll use Fight Club I think Fight Club is like a perfect example of that, because it's so littered with clues for the twist that you do gain something from rewatching it. Because you can sit there and go, shit, there was this and there was this and there was this. How did I not see this coming? This is all in my face. But there's no secrets in this movie. There's no clues. There's nothing to kind of look out for. There's no magic tricks. I feel like it was just kind of tacked on. I didn't really feel like it was earned, and I feel like the director and the writer, I think the same person anyway, the director / writer isn't giving you a reason to go and revisit his movie. And I think that's the worst thing you can do when you make a movie, is to basically give your audience a reason to not have to watch it again. And that is just to kind of spell everything out. Here's a twist. See ya. Enjoy. But there's no reason to revisit this movie because there's no clues to look out for. So that kind of left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Not the nature, like not the actual content of the twist more so, but just the nature of there being a twist and that there's no obvious lead up to it. That's my kind of main problem with it.
I think this is a type of movie, and I think this kind of goes back to like when you're writing dialogue and it's got to be a focus. You're like, let me make sure I spend a lot of time on this and maybe spend too much time cooking it. I feel like that was the thing too. Like you get to the ending and it almost feels like it was a movie in a way meant to have more of an ambiguous or anticlimax to it. And then at the last minute, he's like, I can't do that. So I'm just going to add this. And I mean, that's speculation for my part, but I almost wish, like I gave the movie 4.5 out of 5. I agree with that. I love the movie. I've seen it several times, but I almost wish, as much as it would piss off people, that it would do more of an anticlimactic end, something that it just kind of leaves you there.
This is what I was going to say. I think I 100% agree with you. I think for me, the strongest moment in the movie was when those bay doors open up. They're bathed in light, the smoke's pouring out, and these militia guys walk out towards the police, right? And then it's just, first of all, it's just a freaking beautiful shot. But also you're like, oh shit, what's about to happen? And then they do that great thing with the light timer, like the automatic light timer that goes off when there's no motion. And you see there's going to be no motion because the two dudes are on the ground with their hands up saying, we did it, leave us alone. The militia dudes are standing there with their guns pointed at the cops. And then I think if you like end it on the shot where the light timer goes off and everybody goes down and you see the bodies fall, like, I don't know if you end it right there or if you see them standing up and putting their arms up, maybe end it there. But I think it's, a better movie.
I was just gonna say, I agree with that. And I think it actually helps the message of the film more because I think they're putting them in such a gray box that at the end you're wondering who's in the right here, who's in the wrong, because I think that, whether or not how this goes as a political film, at the end of the day, it puts so much in ambiguity. And I think having it end like you're talking about, which I think is great, just having the lights go off and then you just hear gunshots and that's it, I think is a stronger ending. And I think it fits more with the film as a whole, personally.
Yeah, because that ending scene there, if it like that bumped it up at least a star for me, if not more, just because the tension was so high. Like he did a fantastic job, and then the explanation for everything, the breakdown, I was almost like, ugh, okay.
Yeah, like I think even if they just got rid of the explanation, like if you kind of heard the voices and you heard the kind of the names being talked about by the police, but without the kind of flashbacks, and then without the undercover cop explaining everything,
Yeah.
I think because I love an ambiguous ending.
Uh-huh.
I love an ambiguous ending because that makes me think about the film for a long time afterwards.
Exactly.
If you had left, with maybe Gannon kind of staring, and I'm not trying to tell the guy how to make movies, I'm sitting here in my fucking office recording a podcast. So I'm not telling the dude how to write movies, that if it was me, or well, if this was what would have made me enjoy the film more? Okay, I'll put it that way. I'm not going to say this is how I would have made the movie. If this is what would have made me enjoy the film more. If they ended it with Gannon just kind of looking out at everything, and you kind of hear the voices that we then find out where the cops pretending to be different people and stuff. You hear the name of the cop that was supposedly gunned down earlier being talked about, and it just kind of leaves you with clues. Then you can go back and watch this film. It's like, did they say that name? Did that voice sound familiar to me when they were talking on the radio earlier? That gives you the clues to try and piece this together, what happened. But having the cop just basically explain everything, it just felt like, okay, who gives a shit then? Thanks.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's like fear there. It's like, ooh, am I being too ambiguous? Because I'm sure I've heard people talk about that when writing twists. Like, of course, the twist, so you're like, I don't have to spell it out. But then you're like, will anyone else get it? And then you just kind of over-explain it in a sense.
Yeah, but I understand that, and it could have even been like studio pressure and stuff to say, you better explain what the fuck happened here, otherwise people might be pissed.
Look, our main producer is about to go to jail. We need money.
Yes.
What happened? Y'all are referencing a bunch of stuff. What happened with Cinestate?
So Cinestate was it was a production company of a man named Dallas Saulnier, I want to say it was his last name. Essentially, he was called the Harvey Weinstein of the indie studio area. Okay. And I think that says plenty. He was a very unsavory individual.
Fair enough. Real Morris type.
Yeah.
Not a friend of the podcast.
No. I like the movies he produced, but it was more like how he's giving money to these people who can't go to other studios. That's great. I appreciate that, but that's about it.
Well, not to say anything positive about Weinstein, but that's the heartbreak around him, right? Because like the amount of amazing movies that he was involved with, it's just like, damn it, man.
Every time I watch Scream, I'm like, for fuck's sake.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, he even shows up on Lord of the Rings, and he didn't even produce it. And I'm like, man, that sucks. His name's got to be put on that because it almost went through Miramax.
And most Tarantino movies, at least all of his sort of first half of his career. Yeah, we could sit here all day and talk about all the great movies that Harvey Weinstein's name is on. But let's not. Do we have any final thoughts on Sparrow Creek before we move on to the next movie?
I think we did a good job not walking on eggshells for this one, so that worked out better than I thought it would.
Yes, please don't cancel us. Cool. So do you want to introduce the next film, Zach?
Yes, I will. For the second feature, this is definitely the newest film we've ever done on this podcast. This is just being released for Adam this week, and for us, it was in early April, called How to Blow Up a Pipeline by Daniel Haber. A crew of young environmentalist activists execute a daring mission to sabotage an oil pipeline. I like that one was a lot shorter. So I know this isn't going to be on anything yet, Chris, so I'm sorry your job was not as useful today. I apologize. So Adam, what did you think since we got Chris's start last time?
My thoughts are fairly similar for this one. I don't know if you did this on purpose, for Sparrow Creek. I liked the movie. I didn't love it, but I was pretty entertained. I thought it had a good sort of story, in terms of how the story was built and the sort of general kind of message behind it. Thought it was really good. Thought the cast, again, fairly sort of wide cast. I didn't really recognize many people this time around. This is kind of like the Gen Z version of Sparrow Creek. I didn't really recognize these people. There was one I recognized. Her name's Theo or Thea or something. The girl with cancer. She was in an Irish TV series that came out last year by the same people who made Normal People. So I recognized her, and I think that was about it. But generally, like the film, another one where the ending is a bit weird for me. But yeah, overall, I thought it was an enjoyable watch. I see why people are kind of raving about it. It's been getting some good reviews. Definitely understand that. Has a cool message. Probably a message I can get behind a little bit more than Sparrow Creek. But yeah, pretty solid movie for me. Solid.
What about you, Chris? Since you fell asleep during it, what bored you to tears?
No, I feel bad saying that. It's not a
You're just
boring
kidding.
movie. I did fall asleep. I think it was, yeah, it was after midnight, and I'd had some bourbon. Yeah, the movie's okay. I did wake up at 4:30 in the morning and finish it, so I finished the whole movie. I think that for me, the movie has to be a very particular type. The whole premise is that they're just showing like one event, right? Like they're just showing the actual explosion of the pipeline. But in order to fill up time, they give the backstory of the characters, and they introduce them with title cards, right? To say like, here's Theo's story, here's Xochi's story, right? Here's like whatever, Michael's story. And I think that I understand, like, that's a fairly common thing, especially for low budget films, or well, maybe just films in general. I don't know. It's an easy way to fill up air. I thought it was okay. Maybe it's always a danger when you're making like a really like ecological activism type movie, that there's going to be a natural like a desire from the filmmakers to want to, first of all, paint the picture of why ecological activism is important. And so there's a lot, I think, in the backstory. It's almost like you understand, they try to paint this picture of why this is important, like from a caring about it perspective, right? So sometimes it can be a little heavy-handed with that. But there's nothing wrong with the movie. Like, it's shot well, and I think the actors for the most part did a good job. And yeah, it was okay. I'm glad I've seen it. It's getting a lot of buzz. I was happy to have seen it. What did you think?
I've really liked it. I've actually put it as my number 2 favorite film of the year.
Oh, hell yeah.
Mostly because I have a lot of appreciation for editing, and I think this just has brilliant editing, like all the way through it. Like the way, one of my favorite cuts, and usually with editing, you're like, you don't want to make it obvious because bad editing is when you notice it, unless it's done really, really well, and then you appreciate it. One of my favorites is when Michael is going in there and working with the bombs. He's got to put everything together. And as soon as the explosion happens, it cuts to his story. And I think that is just such a great edit that, it plays so well with tension building and release, tension building and release.
Mm-hmm.
It could have easily been a movie where, you're thinking the whole time, like, okay, the movie's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline. So obviously they're going to blow up a pipeline. Where else can you get tension from? Because we can't just slow burn it to that moment. And that's what I liked about going to the backstories, especially which you kind of touched on, is the reason people are in it. The reason I do think it's necessary is because you have people who are from very different demographics. They're very from different ages. They're from different political. Like, why is this redneck guy here? That's not what you think of when you think of political activism. But when it goes into a story, you're like, yeah, that would be a reason someone like this. Eminent domain is a thing people in rural areas are very much wary of, and they hate. Sure. So I like that. I really appreciate it. And then it showed the connections of how they all kind of got together and little things like that. I just that was my main thoughts. I adored the editing of it. And I've seen the director's previous movie, Cam, which was a very interesting Netflix horror movie that came out 4 or 5 years ago now. So I was glad to see him kind of return for a bit.
This is the second time we're going to mention this movie today, funnily for both. But like, there is something similar in Reservoir Dogs. Mm-hmm. The way it does that, it sort of builds, part of the present plot and then jumps to the backstory of a particular person.
True.
And in both films, I think it works well in some instances and not so well in others. Um, like I'll use the example, like the couple, the sort of two sort of punks. When their backstory happens, their backstory is important to how the rest of the film plays out. But I feel like it just gets thrown in at a part where I was like, come on, we were just getting to the bombing. Like, why are we jumping back here? So there was some parts where I liked it more than others. I know the exact part that you're talking about where he's practicing building the bombs in the shed. That was a really great scene in general, lots of tension and stuff. That was great. So I remember exactly the part you're talking about. And it works in some instances, but I don't think it always works. And I have the same problem with Reservoir Dogs. I don't think the jumping back works every time that he does it. And I kind of felt the same way here. I don't feel like we needed to see it as, maybe, I suppose all their backstory kind of made sense. Maybe you have to see it, but I don't know. I felt like the need to show each of them kind of individually, it killed the tension in some parts for me. I would have liked if they had all gotten done with earlier in the film. But then I suppose you have the problem with, like I said, the backstory of the two punks is so linked in with how the film ends. You kind of had to put it in towards the end somewhere to give you a twist.
And I think for that one, the decision to make you believe something throughout, when she starts taking pictures and stuff like that, you're like, okay, something's going on there. And I think it's, when do you reveal that? And I'm not going to sit here and say it was the best or the worst time to put it. It's just that's definitely got to be the toughest part to pull off as far as backstory, is like, when do you reveal the truth?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem now I'm thinking about as I speak about it. Like, I say that it kind of killed a little bit of the tension for me, but at the same time, I also can't think of a better time to put that in. So yeah, it's just one of those. I can understand, that was probably a really kind of tough decision that, when it came to writing this movie, when you were going to put that in, kind of like the Tim Roth twist in Reservoir Dogs, I suppose. I don't know why we ended up talking about Reservoir Dogs for these films. You probably did not plan for that at all, Zach. That we ended up talking about Reservoir Dogs so much for these movies, but they are stylistically similar in two very different ways. So it does make sense that we ended up bringing them up. But that was the only thing I kind of struggled with. But now that we're kind of talking it out, I realize the director's hands are probably kind of tied.
Yeah, and I guess there's always the argument, like, well, if you can't find the best way to do it, then do something else. But it's like, I don't know, you kind of need that. You need, like, there to be this, because you have so much external drama, they're building a bomb. Like, there's so much that can go wrong when you have very uneducated people going in and figuring out how to do something incredibly dangerous. But you need that internal drama too. Like, you have these people who are completely different human beings who have completely different motivations. You got to have some type of internal drama there.
Since we're solving editing decisions on the show today,
okay.
since we're telling people how to make movies here, I think I have an idea. Because if you wait to show the explosion till the end, I think there's an assumption that something's going to go wrong, right? But because nothing went wrong and the explosion actually happened kind of as planned, I think it would have been cool to start the movie with the explosion, see it, and then almost get back into the backstories and build up the world, and then cut off right at the point where the guy is about to hit the detonator or something like that.
Right.
Because there's no mystery in what you like at the end of it. There's no twist to the explosion. Like, it just went off, right? So it was it was just cool to see an explosion, but that wasn't an interesting part of the story at that point, because nothing happened outside of script or off script.
Maybe we've been doing this podcast wrong this whole time. Maybe we should be picking films and then just trying to fix them.
There we go. There we go.
They fix your films.
I mean, I do see the silliness of us sitting here and just trying to fix the movie. But for me, let me say that I would have enjoyed it more, I think, in that way, because they took so long to build up to the explosion. I just assumed something was going to go wrong, or it wasn't going to go as planned or something, because it's like, well, why are you taking so long to reveal it, right?
I think that's just part of just making like building tension. I actually really enjoyed the scenes where they were getting ready for the bomb. There's that scene, where again the two punks are at one of the stations, and the two, whatever they are, guards or whatever they are, kind of show up, and you're like, oh shit, something's gonna go wrong here. They're gonna have to try and figure, a way out of this. And so I think there's a reason why they left the bomb to the end, because yeah, okay, it's great for us to sit here in hindsight and say, oh well, the bomb went off without a hitch. Why did they do it like that? But like, you don't know that when you're watching the movie.
Right.
So it's just about building the tension. The bomb, something doesn't have to go wrong for it to not be tense.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I guess that goes into the old, like, what's that old thing Hitchcock would talk about, the bomb under the table or under the bus, whatever it was, like, and that kind of goes, I guess, off in the Chekhov's gun too. It'd be real disappointed if that thing didn't go off.
Yeah,
You'd
exactly.
be like,
So
like, oh, you set it up for it to go off. But one thing I did think was interesting, watching both these films and thinking about them for back to back, was because we were talking about a little bit of the last one about, these people probably do see themselves as freedom fighters. I thought it was interesting that, they have a conversation in this one where they pretty much just straight up say they're terrorist, and they're acknowledging that idea. And, because that's kind of a hard word to describe yourself as a terrorist. But it is also interesting that they make a huge point to do everything they can not to hurt other people through this. So I don't know. I just thought it was kind of an interesting parallel between these like two groups of very different people.
I did like that they brought up the financial implications of the attack. Just like, that's something that a lot of people probably don't think about, but that is a practical reality of stopping oil flow in the US. Like, there are going to be people impacted by that. So I thought that was clever. Yeah, you bring up a good point. I like that they call it, what is it? Jesus was a terrorist. So
Yeah,
they,
yeah, they bring up that to the, and that's what we were talking about earlier, to the right person, anyone who fights for their what they believe is right is a terrorist, depending on who you
yeah,
ask.
yeah.
one thing like that kind of caught my eye watching it, and this is going to talk more about the technical aspect of it as opposed to the plot or anything like that. The film, did the film kind of look weird? I don't know if it's like the camera they used or the color grading, but like it didn't really look like a movie. It looked more like a HBO show or like a Showtime show or something like that. Like Euphoria or one of those kind of newer shows. Does anyone else kind of get that this film didn't really look like a movie? Am I
I didn't
weird?
think much about that, but now that you say it, I can kind of see what you're coming from, and I do wonder if that's having his first film be on Netflix. If you're kind of taught to shoot a certain way, because I think Netflix has a certain look to all their stuff too.
Yeah.
So I definitely see your point there, and I'd have to go back and kind of rewatch again just to kind of get a better answer for that, or at least a better idea of exactly what I'm thinking of now. But yeah, I can kind of see that, to be honest. I do think some of the landscape shots look great, but that's kind of thing about going out west too, is the west always looks great.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell if it was like the color grading or the camera, but like it looked, I don't know, it's kind of like washed out. It didn't have like a lot of high contrast or anything like that. And again, it could have just been a creative decision, but yeah, when I was just watching it, it just reminded me a lot of like just like kind of modern TV series, as opposed to like a movie. And I don't know how big of a budget this film had. I don't know if it was, I know Neon distributed it, but I didn't know much about any of the actual production companies or the ones who bankrolled the film itself. So I don't know if it had like a big budget to work with or if it was a lower budget. I don't know if you know that,
Well,
Zach.
let's be
But
honest, any budget it had was to blowing up that miniature.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing, I suppose, isn't it? That's where you lose all your money. But yeah, it looked not bad. I'll put that out there. It didn't look bad. It just looked weird. I suppose the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to go back now that you've kind of mentioned that and see what I think about it going through again. I'm sure I'll rewatch it again whenever it comes out. But yeah, I can, from my memory, I can see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is this was it this one, or was it Sparrow Creek that was a XYZ Films movie as well?
That would have been Sparrow, I believe.
Okay, so because I was just thinking it was interesting seeing XYZ Films because they're a Vinegar Syndrome partner label now, but I know they obviously produce movies as well. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, they did a lot with Cinestate. I believe they were kind of a co-partner with Cinestate for a while.
Oh, okay.
Because I think Brawl and Cell Block 99 and Bone Tomahawk were both XYZ as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I could be wrong, but that my memory seems to suggest that it's on the Blu-ray when I look at it.
I'm trying to find, how do you find it on what is it listed under IMDb? They have producers. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Oh, I can look on Wikipedia. They're better at producers, I guess.
Adam loves IMDb. He can tell you how to get there.
As the last time he visited it in 2012.
The message boards are still up.
Well, to be fair, I actually go on IMDb fairly regularly, purely to check the parental guidelines of a film before I watch it.
Oh, that's
So,
right.
I actually end up on there quite regularly, as much as I don't like IMDb as a grading system because I don't trust people. I don't trust normal people. But their parental guidelines are very helpful. I suppose we'll kind of touch on the ending of this movie. Just nothing else during it we want to sort of bring up. There's another film that kind of ended with a bit of a twist, but I kind of liked this one a little bit better. Maybe, I don't know. Anyone have any sort of particular strong thoughts on the twist ending?
I mean, it's one of those twists. It makes sense. The decision makes sense. I don't know if it's necessary, but I get it. I think that's where I kind of get left with it. Like, I'm like, if it's there, cool. If it's not there, cool. I don't really think it adds or takes away anything, which is kind of odd for a twist. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm left.
What's the twist that the girl was an informant?
Well, I guess that's part of it. When I think of the twist, it's that the two girls end up basically taking the fall for all of it, I guess. When they start cleaning up, you think they're all trying to get away, but it turns out they never planned to get away, and that was never part of the plan.
Yeah, exactly. It's that, and like, yeah, the girl was an informant, but everybody knew that it was part of the plan that she was an informant because she was also able to get insider information that helped them complete their task. Right. So everybody was kind of in on it. Like, it looked like for most of this movie, to me anyway, when I was watching it, I was kind of going like, how are these people so resourceful? These sort of random ragtag group of people are very, very resourceful for a bunch of kids or young adults. And you're wondering kind of how they're going to pull everything off. Are all these people going to go to jail? Is there going to be an escape, like a Thelma and Louise style, running from the police, whatever it may be? And then the twist was that no, everybody had their places. The two that were kind of spearheading it were always going to be the ones to take the fall for everybody else, and the FBI was in on it as well. So yeah, I just thought it was an interesting direction to go with it, and it kind of made the rest of the film kind of make sense, because during a lot of it you have to kind of suspend your disbelief in terms of like, how are they getting all the resources that they need, when these are just a bunch of regular kids, early people in their early 20s. How are they getting all these things that they need to pull this off? How are they getting all their information? How are they getting all the knowledge? How are they getting all of the actual things they need to do it all? So it kind of makes sense that a few sides are kind of playing against each other. I still don't really understand the FBI's part in it, as to kind of, maybe I missed something and someone can enlighten me, but I still don't really understand. Like, I know obviously, yeah, no, I'm not even going to try and put it all together. There's a lot of moving parts in this movie. I feel like this is one that I would watch again, even though going by my ranking system of 4 stars, it's a film that I would like that I probably wouldn't watch again. But now, kind of thinking about it and talking about it and trying to put everything in context, I feel like I might need to watch it again just to make sure I'm picking up everything right with the ending.
Well, I
Well,
mean, the
yeah.
I mean, just to make sure, because I didn't really get that necessarily. The FBI was 100% on board. They just knew she was going to basically be a part of it, and she needed to
Yeah.
inform them before the explosion happens, whatever they're going to do, so they can get arrested, with actual charges of building a bomb and things like that. The part they're upset about is the fact that a bomb actually went off, and she didn't tell them anything.
Right. Okay. So I've obviously mixed that up in my head then, so that makes more sense.
Yeah, because they knew, they 100% knew she was going to be there, and her job was to do something else. But of course, she lies later and says, "Well, they kept me in the dark, and they just did it, and I didn't have any part of that. I didn't know." And they kind of just have to go with that because, I mean, she had sent them the correct information. Now, and of course, I don't think they trust what she's saying, because they do start following the I can't remember his name. The guy at the university after the fact does see him getting followed, so it's Sean. I think Sean's his name. Yeah. So I mean, I don't think they necessarily believe her, but she did give all the evidence that they needed for them two to go down, because I don't think they'll even necessarily believe that 2 people could have pulled this off, especially one that's a cancer patient.
Makes sense. And okay, cool. I feel like I do need to go back and rewatch just to make sure I fully get the ending, because I did like the ending, and it got me thinking about different moving parts and stuff. So maybe it was a bit more obvious than what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, this was gonna be an Oscar buzzy type movie, right? So happy to see it. I don't know. I've been trying to figure out exactly like why it just didn't resonate with me. I don't really have a good answer. It was just kind of
It might have something to do with the fact that you finished it at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's true. I think I need more genre stuff at that point. I need more really like gore and blood and stuff at that point to get into it.
The 1 week I don't choose that.
too much brain work in this movie. Right, well, if there's no final thoughts, I can go into sort of telling you, because I haven't even told you guys or given you guys any real hints as to what we're going to be watching next time around. Do you want me to do that?
Yes, let's do it. I got to
Cool.
pull up my letterbox so I can.
Chris is going to be so happy with me for this. He's going to be, and I'm not being ironic here, you're going to be so freaking happy.
Okay.
Because you don't have to watch anything new. So last time we recorded, I made a joke that we should rename ourselves They Live by Radiance Films. So let's just go in on it. We're going to watch 2 films that have been put out by Radiance, but these 2 are actually streaming as well. So Zach, don't worry, you don't have to buy these films. They are streaming. Chris already owns them, and Chris actually already talked about these 2 movies on our YouTube channel recently. So if you want to get a sneak peek into what his thoughts are going to be, our YouTube link is in the description, but we're obviously all going to talk about them next time we record. So the first one we're going to talk about is currently showing on the Criterion channel. It's the George Armitage movie, Miami Blues, which is a really cool movie. It's like a black comedy crime film starring Alec Baldwin and Fred Ward and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Really fun movie. It's really good. I think it really mixes crime and comedy really well. I remember when I first watched it, I think I mentioned this on the podcast as well. When I first watched it, I read a review that described it as Heat if both the cop and the bad guy were both idiots, which, that's a pretty good description. The next movie is showing on the Arrow player, and now stay with me, Zach. It's a French New Wave movie, but stay with me. I just want to describe what the film is about, and then you can decide. So I'll just read you a very sort of description from Letterboxd. A series of crimes troubles the public tranquility. On March 1968, Helene Picard, a prostitute sentenced to death 2 years before several murders, is killed by an executioner, but immediately the violent crimes go on again. So it's like a murder film, basically. So
Okay.
yeah, you don't need, it's not going to be, well, I haven't seen it. Chris has seen it, but I haven't seen it yet. So I can't say if it's very much going to be like a good art film, but I doubt it based on the description. So yeah, it is technically a French New Wave film, but I don't think you're going to have much of an issue with this one, considering it's also like 69 minutes long or something. So it's not a major
What
investment
is
of
the
your
name of
time.
it?
Oh, sorry, I never said the name of the film. It's called A
Okay.
Woman Kills.
Okay. I was
Um,
like, did I miss it?
No, I just didn't say it. So
There's a
just confirm. Sorry,
one
Chris, go
of the
ahead.
no, just as an important background piece. One of the short films this director made right before A Woman Kills. The first 3 minutes of the short are people going into a restaurant where they can order different types of feces, and comes down and they eat the feces in the short. Um, and it got
Wow.
banned. And people, the he was in with all the French New Wave like producers, like he was in with the same people that were putting out all the New Wave movies. And so they picked up the movie, and nobody had any idea how to distribute this because it's just kind of all over the place. Um, it's like if John Waters got together with Buñuel and made a New Wave movie.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it like that. It's got a cool vibe to it.
Will Adam finally find a French New Wave film that I will like?
We'll have to tune in 2 weeks to find out, I guess. So
Yeah.
just
About
confirm.
that.
So we have Miami Blues, which is on the Criterion channel, and A Woman Kills, which is on the Arrow player. But for me and Chris, we own them on disc. Chris has seen them recently. I haven't. I've seen Miami Blues recently, but haven't gotten around to A Woman Kills yet. So we'll find out what I think as well.
All right. So mostly work for me. Cool.